Welcome back to the Brain Slides podcast. This is your resident slide surgeon, Nathan. Today I'm bringing you a real-world example of some slides that a colleague asked me to design. The original content of this slide comes from an article of the National Staff Development Council that was published in the summer of 2009. And while the content is the same, the layout is completely mine. What we see here is a matrix that measures teacher efficacy. And you'll notice that on the x-axis, we've got the student focus of the teacher. On the y-axis, their content pedagogy. And we divide this into 4 quadrants of a struggling teacher, a caretaking teacher, a technician, and a master teacher, which ostensibly is the goal. Now you may notice that as I presented this, it wasn't as clear as it could be, and I'm going to talk about 2 reasons for that. The first one is that this chart is not necessarily intuitive. You'll notice on the y-axis that strong content pedagogy is at the bottom, while weak content is at the top. On a normal Cartesian plane that we're used to looking at, whether it be in geometry and math, we expect the higher value to be at the top of the y-axis. Again, this layout is my own, but in the original quadrants, the weak content was at the top. I feel it would be much more intuitive if we switch those. So we'll put the strong content at the top of the y-axis and weak at the bottom. This, of course, will require us to also switch the 4 types of teachers. The second thing about this chart has to do with cognitive load. And cognitive load tells us that the more information that we present at a time, the more difficult it is to understand that information. Look at the chart again and notice how many items are on this chart. We have the title of the chart, the titles of the axes, and then we have the titles of the 4 quadrants all at once. There's a few ways that we can break this down. One way would be to use smaller font, but you may notice that this font is actually very small. This is down to size 14, and anybody in the back of the room would not be able to see it. Color is another option. We can separate the y-axis from the x-axis, but this now introduces more variables than are necessary. My preferred way of presenting a chart like this is to break it down over a number of slides. On the first slide, we introduce the x-axis, which measures how well teachers know their students, from having a weak student focus to a strong student focus. Then we introduce the y-axis, which measures how well teachers know their stuff, with a weak content pedagogy at the bottom and a strong content pedagogy at the top. We can then introduce the quadrants, and now we do not need to continue showing the labels of the x and the y axes. Next time you're preparing a chart, I hope you can keep in mind cognitive load and make your charts more intuitive.